Hello. Today I am working on my Milestone 3 for my Aerostructures class, ENAE324 at the University of Maryland. Today, in Milestone 3, this milestone, we get to do something fun with our models. As you can see here on the screen, or as you could just see, I designed something known as a Skycrane for my other two milestones. What a Skycrane does is it takes something heavy that needs to land on another planet or anywhere, and it drops it. But it's also powered by rocket engines and generates enough thrust to safely drop something on another planet. So what I decided to do for something fun, in addition to 3D printing my model, which I'm working on actively, I decided to build it in a program known as Kerbal Space Program. It's a game that came out in the early 2010s. I have several hundred hours in it, and it's a sandbox for designing and building spacecraft. So what I'm doing right now in the video, as I talk over this, is I'm trying to mimic my design in this game. And I'm trying a whole bunch of different parts and a bunch of configurations of different sizes to see to get it to work. So right now I'm putting in the struts and trusses for this crane that have to be able to withstand a decent amount of force from the rocket engines, while also simultaneously fighting the inertial force that is caused by accelerating rapidly in one direction, as well as carrying the load of the payload. In this case, the payload will be a rover. I chose a rover because the original Skycrane that this is modeled off of dropped the Curiosity rover on Mars. That was a NASA mission, and it looked a little bit different than this. It had a hexagonal design. This is a quad design, just for simplicity's sake, because 4 is a cool number. But as you can see, it's starting to come together. It's starting to look like my actual model as I keep tabbing between the two. What I'm doing right now in game is picking different rocket engines to see which one would fit best for the use. I'm planning to take this craft to the moon in the game and drop a rover, which I'll be building shortly underneath it. Right now what I'm doing is I'm adding on control surfaces. These things are called RCS thrusters. If you've designed rockets or know anything about them, they're like tiny thrusters that shoot out propellant and let you turn and move around and orient yourself in useful ways. So that's what those are used for. This design, though, it's large. I had to use a couple mods to get this to work. One of them is known as Tweak Scale. It lets you change the size of parts from their stock size to whatever you need it to be. And that's why I'm able to build this structure so accurately to my model, I suppose. So that I can actually get something that's shaped like what I designed to scale of what I designed. The weights are going to be a little bit off because I can't control those. But the shape itself will be fairly accurate. Here comes the rover. I tried to model it to be about the same size as the Curiosity rover that was dropped. The wheels are a bit exaggerated. They're a little bit big, but they give good suspension and helped add to the weight to simulate the proper payload. What I eventually do is, to get this thing to the moon, I just build a single surface to moon module. Normally there's a docking port on the top of this that's sized to the International Space Station regulations. You can see it there. So normally this would dock with something I had in orbit. I'd refuel it or pick up something that I already put in orbit and then carry it to the moon and use the Skycrane to drop it. But instead I figured, why not? I'll just make a giant rocket underneath it, slap it to the bottom and let it go. So that's exactly what I did. I did most of that off screen just to save time for this video, make it short and sweet because this is worth a grade and I don't want to bore you. But I had a lot of fun trying to build just a massive rocket. This thing weighs many tons. And here we are on the launch pad, ready to send up our abomination of a Skycrane with lander. The last thing I did in the editor was I added struts to it. And I did that, I should mention this because this is a class on structures, that if it just had that little girder connecting the lander to all this thrust on the bottom, this thing would wobble. It'd go nuts. It'd vibrate, it'd torsion, it would break. And in this game, struts are structural supports that work in tension and compression. And I added them from the bottom of each of the struts. Well, they're both called struts. From the bottom of the trusses to the rover itself, and then from the rover to the main rocket body. That way it stops any sort of vibrational movement, as well as makes it one sturdy, solid kind of frame. You can see the little RCS thrusters burning as I orient myself. And here we are in low Earth, not orbit yet, but soon to be, as I burn retrograde to raise my orbit. I really like this game. I like Kerbal, and I mentioned I dumped several hundred hours into it. It's kind of what got me into aerospace, not gonna lie. It's just cool being able to build rockets with real physics. As you can see on the left, there's a bunch of numbers ticking. That's the numbers that are normally hidden from you as a player that I have a mod that shows me. That's what the game's calculating in real time. It's all the orbital parameters that you would need to launch something. And it even this game even has like a node planning feature. And one of the mods, which I just opened up, it's called MechJeb or Mechanical Jeb. The pilot in the bottom right's named Jebediah. He's kind of a joke in the community. He's been the pilot of every dangerous mission. But this mod, named after him, is an autopilot, per se, that will automatically execute certain things. Although sometimes it breaks, as it's doing right now, where it's oscillating me in a way it can't recover from. So I decided to put in the manual control and actually play the game. And I got my orbit to be just about where I wanted it by slowly incrementing it, which is about 14,000 was it meters or kilometers? I think meters above the moon in this case. So I wanted to circularize it, made another maneuver, and needed about 315 meters per second delta V to do that. And as you can see, I have about 1,600 right now left in my spacecraft at its current weight. So I had plenty to spare, or so I thought. That's one of the fun things about Kerbal space program is things don't always go according to plan. So what I'm trying to do right now is make a maneuver for landing where I kill all my lateral velocity, and then I'm only left with a straight up and down gravitational velocity, we'll say. And I thought, oh, that'll make it easy. I'll just land straight down and things will be fine. I'll drop the lander and then burn up to get away from it. So I tried this. This was all by hand. In the bottom left, you can see my stats for my impact time and my suicide burn. And if you notice, those are very similar. So I actually ran out of fuel and crashed. So I loaded back up a previous thing right after I circularized, and I was like, okay, well that didn't work. So let's go to the autopilot instead, and let's try and let the computer do it. So the one I just turned on is a landing autopilot. It usually works fantastically, but this time it was a little finicky, as you'll see. It has trouble when you're landing on something with a lot of craters because the altitudes, you have your sea level altitude, not that the moon has a sea, although some could argue it does, it has several. But in this case, it did not calculate the altitude right, and it just pile drived into the surface. I let it bounce a bit. So, defeated from the computer, I decided for a third time to just go ahead, try landing like I would land any other craft, with a nice low burn. I'm still mindful of my suicide burn time and my impact time, and I was looking at the delta V. You can see that my burn length was like 22 seconds, and I only had 20 seconds worth of burning left, which now it's down to like 2.3 seconds. So this was going to be a little close. And here we go. Burn at the last minute, drop it, and then back off. And it bounced. I was able to land this on its thrusters though. Normally it would explode, but for some reason it didn't, probably because it's so big. But that's the concept, is you drop, and then at the very last minute you burn up, kill the velocity, and then let go of whatever you need to drop. So you can actually walk around this Jeb and fly around with his little jetpack, and bounce in some cases, as he's doing now, tumbling down the lunar surface. And I eventually make it over to the rover that has crash landed, but it survived, and we can figure out how to flip it later. But yeah, that's my project. Part of my Milestone 3 is making a Skycrane that actually worked, and once you have it, it worked. So thanks for watching. Please give